Alright guys, Blake here with HornScore. Welcome back to episode 2 of the Estimator Pass or Fail. If you didn't see the first video, what this series is all about is us putting the HornScore Estimator tool to the test and trying to be as transparent as possible where it works well and where it maybe struggles or where the limitations show. The purpose of this is so you guys can learn how to get the most value out of this resource, out of this tool, to help you with your field judging, to be more precise, and to have a little bit more fun while you're doing it. So let's go ahead and dive in. We have one of our practice videos, and as normal, that we know this animal has a known score, but we're not going to look at it. I don't remember. I know it's a big bull. I don't remember the individual measurements. That's kind of the point of these videos, is I'm going to go use this how I normally would, and then we're going to compare the results and see what what kind of information we can gain from those results, good, bad, or average. And then we'll give it a pass or fail grade at the end of the video. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and dive in. Now, normally I would plug in a bunch of my own numbers using the normal method, comparing anatomical values. I'd go through the video. I almost always plug in all my measurements or my guesses before. For the sake of keeping this video short enough, we're going to go ahead and just dive in, and then I'll, explain some of my thoughts as I go through it. So the first thing we need to do, well, actually, before we do that, just a reminder, if you've never watched this video or you've never used the Estimator tool before, please watch this video before diving in. It goes in how the technology works, what the limitations are. It's really important to understand some of this stuff before you, really just dive headfirst into it. So now we're going to go ahead and start on this bull. The first thing you need to do is make a couple of keyframes that you want to draw on. And you're looking for good anatomicals to draw, and you're also looking for good angles to draw the scoreable measurements. So we're going to go ahead and get a head-on view. This is where I really use the plus minus to go frame by frame. I'm going to make a keyframe there. As you can see, I can see the inside of eye to inside of eye. I can see the ear length, ear width. I could also draw the inside spread there. I'm also going to take this quartered measurement. I can see the right fourth pretty good, just to kind of start pointing out things as I'm noticing. So if you guys notice that fifth point on the right side, I can see it. I don't know if I'd be able to draw it really well from that angle. Like the fronts in this example, I wouldn't be able to draw very good because they're growing at me and then they're tipping up. Whereas I could draw that right fourth, that right third, maybe the right P2 decent at that angle. And then, so we're going to keep scrolling the video here. And then I'm going to try and grab one where I can draw that left fourth right there. I like that angle for the fourth. And then we'll get, as much of a broadside shot as possible. And the way I'm doing that is like I'll line up the points, like I'll line up the thirds, so I'm getting as much of a broadside angle, and I'll try and draw that beam on that. And that's about it. I could draw the right fifth really good right there too. Perfect. So now we're going to go ahead and dive in, hit the Estimator tool button. Remember that you can always hit this plus button on the screen if you want to go back and add more keyframes. So a lot of times, once you get into a score and you're looking for a certain angle, you need to go add some more keyframes. You can just go back and add these and continue on. Now the first thing we need to do is to draw an anatomical reference or references. You can draw multiple or you can draw one. So I'm going to start with the inside of eye to inside of eye and use that reference. And we're going to go there to there. And that should be about right, and we'll hit Save Reference Line. Now I could continue to draw, or I could leave it at that one. For this example, we'll leave it at that one. One of the number one keys for using this tool is to pick the most predictable measurement to draw first. And so what I mean by that is the one that you think you can guess the best. And, using the example, since we're on a bull elk, I would not start with the fronts. I think the fronts are sometimes harder to gauge because of the curvature. So if you look at like that left P1 right here, it's harder to visually gauge all of that curvature. I'm not saying you can't do it with a high level of accuracy, but it's harder to guess than this left fifth right here, which is pretty straight, very little curvature. This is also a nice length to guess. It's just barely longer than my eye to nose, 12 to 13 inches. My top of back to bottom of belly is about 28 to 30. So when I'm just looking at this fifth using my known anatomicals, like the old school method, my guess is this fifth point is somewhere north of 14 and definitely under 16. That's my guess. So I would start by drawing that measurement first, because when I first start using the Estimator tool, I want to make sure my scale is accurate. And what I mean by that is I could have drawn a bad anatomical reference line, or the anatomical can be different than what I had input. So the average inside of eye to inside of eye, if I remember correctly, is 8 inches or 8.5. But what if this bull has a little bit smaller head? If I use the eye to nose and the average is 12.5, and this bull has a longer or shorter head, I want to try and confirm that. One more way you can test this, which is kind of a unique use case I'll show you guys. So I use the inside of eye to inside of eye as my primary anatomical. I know the eye to nose should be roughly 12.5 inches. Well, if I go draw this, let's say left P1, now I'm not actually drawing the left P1, I'm drawing the front of eye to tip of nose to see if I get about 12.5 inches. So 13, so that's close enough. So my anatomical that I drew on the eye to eye, that just creates another reference point. It's kind of a weird use case. You don't have to do this, but it's something I'll do to confirm the anatomical that I'm using from time to time. Now, that's also not a perfect science because the whole bull could just have a smaller head or bigger head, but it just gives me one more point of reference. Now, we're going to go draw this left fifth first because, like I said, I'm pretty confident on the value of this left fifth using my eye. And we're going to draw that down, and I'm expecting somewhere between 14 to 16. Now, if I get a flyer measurement that's, you know, way under 14 or way over 16, then I'm gonna think twice. And so right here I got 17.14. I just don't think that fifth is 17.14. Now people, you know, your gut says, well, I just shouldn't use it on this bull. It's like, well, that's not quite the case. If you're confident on that first guess, let's go back to the anatomicals. I'm going to go ahead and delete this reference line. So I got to go to the picture I used to draw it on. We'll delete that line. It's going to update my values, so that measurement's gone for now. Let's try and use a different anatomical. So let's use this length of ear from base to tip. And we're going to draw this. Maybe this one's closer to the average on this particular bull. So we'll draw that length of ear from base to tip. And then we're going to hit Save Reference Line. It's going to ask me if I want to update. I do want to update. It took that left fifth from 17 and whatever it was to 16.5. I think that's a lot closer. I'm going to add one more and go top of ear to bottom of ear and see if this changes my value anymore. So we'll go top of ear. This is generally a very consistent anatomical when you can get a clear line, so you need a pretty good video. But when you do have a good video, the top of ear to bottom ear does not vary as much from animal to animal. It's going to ask me if I want to update. So that changed my fifth to 15.125. Now I'm feeling really good about the scale that I've created for this bull. So it's not necessarily... this is how I use my brain in conjunction with the estimator tool to get the best results possible, by picking the most predictable measurement and then going and drawing the harder to visually estimate measurements after. So I feel like I have a really good scale set now. I'm confident that 15 1/8 is about right. Now I can go draw some of these harder measurements. So let's take this to the left fourth, which is longer and has some curvature. And we'll go up here and we'll draw that left fourth out. And this looks like a pretty good fourth. You know, it looks like a 20-inch type of fourth with that curvature, so I'm expecting to get around 20, and we're going to get 19.68. You know, that sounds about right. Let's go over and just kind of scroll through our photos as we go here. This head-on view, I can see that right third really good, so we'll draw that right third, and I'm picking the ones that I can capture the curvature of the point on. That's always what I'm looking for. Once I have my scale set and I'm confident in my scale, I'm trying to make sure and capture as much of that curvature as I can. The thirds are great to draw head on or, you know, at a slightly quartered angle. So 15.94. Now, one thing I'm doing as I'm doing this, like 15.94 sounds, or 15 7/8 sounds a little short just looking at that third. The reason that probably is because I'm probably not quite capturing that third. So this is an example where I might make a new keyframe. So like right here, you can see that same right third point. I can capture the curvature better. So we're going to hit Add Keyframe. And I'm going to go back and actually redraw this third and see if it varies from 15 7/8. This is when you really get into the nitty-gritty of using the estimator tool, because if you look at the angle I just drew before this picture, I don't know that I captured all this curvature. We'll find out here in a second. But now I can see the full length of that third, and I'm going to be able to drop my points more accurately, and I'm going to end up with 18. That sounds a heck of a lot closer to me. So that shows the difference right there of the angle at which you draw your points makes all the difference, because you're getting the value of a line, not of a measurement. So the estimator tool is spitting out a value of the line that you draw, and if that line doesn't capture all that curvature, it's going to end up short. So this is where we kind of get into the nitty-gritty of really trying to be precise, and the more time you spend with this, the better you'll get at knowing when to change your angle, when to redraw the line, etc. All right, we'll go ahead and draw that right fourth out, because like right here, if you look at this fourth, I can see the tip. I can capture this curvature, and I can get it all the way down to the base, and we'll draw the right fourth, and we'll go down here, and we'll go up to the tip. And it looks like it comes off right around there, 19 inches. That might be, I don't know, it might be a little short. I don't know if it's angle or not, but I'd probably manually adjust that one up to 20, 21, something like that. We'll see here in a little bit. All right, let's get a different angle. I wish I could see that left fifth a little bit, or the right fifth, sorry, because it looks longer than the left. I wish I could get a little cleaner picture of that. It's hard to see with that grass, but, you know, right, let's see, maybe right about there is probably my best that I can personally see it. So I'm going to go draw that right fifth. You notice how whenever you create a new keyframe, it automatically defaults to that, so it makes it really easy trying to figure out the difference between the grass and the tine here. I think that's about where the tip is. And remember, these are always just estimations. That's where you want to play with this thing a little bit to get the best results. And we're getting 17.76. Perfect. So now we can keep going. The only thing I haven't really gotten is a spread, a beam, and a measurement. So I would try and, or sorry, a front, a beam, and then the spread. So if I can try and get one of these fronts, the fronts are one of the hardest things to draw on bulls because it's just hard to see sometimes because they start to blend in together because you want to get them broadside, but then figuring out which front is which can be challenging at times. Sometimes that's when I'll come in and rewatch the video, and I'm picking out like that left P1, which looks like the longest front to me for sure. So we'll get it to where I can see that left P1 right about there. Let's see, I'm going to use my plus minus to be a little bit more precise. And I'm going to get that left P1 right there and hit add keyframe. So now we're going to come in here, and I'm a little off angle, so it might be a little longer than what I'm going to draw here, but it should be relatively close. We'll go left P1 to the tip. And this is a really long front. Looks like a, 17, 18 inch type front. And we'll get it right down there to the base. And then if it's through that tine, it's probably right about there. So 16.77. I think with the angle being a little off, that's probably like an 18 inch front is my guess. You'll notice, like as I'm talking about this, I'm always using my brain and adjusting if I think my drawing's not quite in the right spot. The last thing I want to draw here, well, maybe we'll draw the spread too, but I want to draw this left beam, and the beam's definitely going to be short. So let's go back to the video. I just want to show this. If you see this left beam, you can see how it curves out and away from the head, and then it actually curves kind of back straight, and then it goes out and away from the head at the tip again, so it kind of sways out there at the tip. So I'm not going to capture all that curvature, so more than likely this measurement's going to come up a little bit short, and I know that. I know this measurement is going to come up a little short, and I'm going to compensate for that because I know I'm not capturing all that curvature perfectly, but it does give me an idea. So, on average, it's going to be a few inches short of what it actually is. We'll go left main beam. We'll go down here to the burr, and I'm going to try and get, the curvature that I can capture here as this beam curves. And we'll follow it out. All the way out there to the tip, which is, I can zoom in a little further if I want to get a little more precise. We'll draw that out, and 43.91, but I didn't quite capture all this right here. So you see as I zoom, you can start to see where I may have missed this slightly. When you really can zoom, it makes it a lot. And so 43.67. So I know that's going to be short of what it is. In my head, I would probably add about 5 inches. Probably 5 inches I'm missing in this beam, and where it swoops out is my guess. And that just takes a little bit of experience in using this, but generally, 4 to 6 inches on a beam, depending on how much curvature it has, is what you can generally add on an elk's main beam. The last thing would be the spread, and this bull has a super interesting spread because if you look at his beams, they tip out. So as long as this doesn't exceed, the longest main beam, then you could use that for your spread. So I'm going to find a spot where I can see both tips of that main beam, which right there I can see both tips, and I'm going to add that. So it's going to be a crazy wide spread because of his beam configuration. It's going to be, north of 48, 49, and it might even be into the 50s, but we'll draw that out and see what I get. So inside spread, I kind of went a little out. So 51.16, I bet that's about right on that bull, with how his beams swoop out. Perfect. So now I could continue to draw and keep going and adding more keyframes, adding more measurements, but we're going to stop there for this video. We're going to go back to the calculator. Now, normally, I would have all my measurements already input, and I would punch the rest of them in here, the ones that are missing. But what we're going to do for the sake of the video is just make any adjustments to the ones that we'll talk about the adjustments that I would make. So Like that front 16 6/8, the left P1, I'm guessing would be a little longer because I drew it at this kind of quartered angle right here on the estimator tool. I didn't quite capture the full length, so I would probably edit that out a little bit, make it a little bit bigger. And then the third on the left one, if you remember, I redrew that. I think that one's going to be pretty darn close. And this is just me guessing on what's going to be close. We'll find out here in a second. The fourth should be in the ballpark. You know, they look a hair longer, but they're probably 20, 21 inch type fourths is my guess. I mostly captured it. I don't know if I dropped the points perfect on the very edge of the tip, but it should be in the ballpark. The fifths, I like the measurements I got. I think the left one's pretty darn close. I think the right one is at least 17 6/8. It looks longer, but I bet that's in the ballpark. And then obviously I would need to punch in the 6 and the other main beam. And this main beam 43, that's going to be short. I know it's going to be short. That beam's, it's longer than that because if you use our rule of it's roughly 30 inches to the fourth point, I know that it's longer than 43. How much longer? I would guess, 48, 49, something like that. All right. Inside spread 51, I think that's about right. Let's go to the end and see how we did. We'll zoom out here. So left P1, I got 16 6/8 in the estimator tool. Actual is 18 2/8. And that was one I said I probably was, the bull was a little facing towards me too much. It was going to be a little short. It was a little short. That's a pass. That's great. The right P3 is 19 6/8. So I'm a little bit short on that. I got 18. And could be angle, could be where I dropped the line. An inch and 6/8, that's like a C minus. It's not great, but it's close enough to let me know it's a long third. And then the fourths, we're at 20 2/8, 21 6/8. So I am on the left, I am about 7/8 or 6/8 of an inch off. On the right, we're about 2 inches off. So for some reason, the angle of the right I measured was a little bit short. Still close to the left was pretty good. The right was a little bit longer. But going back to this video, like I estimated 19 5/8 on the left. You can tell that the right, looks pretty long. And I don't know if I didn't, because of the mud on the tip of that point, I don't know if I started my measurement short. I may have. I may have just not quite caught that because that muddy piece was in the grass on that right fourth. I think I might have started my measurement a little bit short, but I'll go back and check and see if that was the case. But still pretty close. The fifths were 14 6/8 and 19. And I got 15 8, 17 6/8, so in the ballpark, a little short. A little short on the right anyways. It was a little bit longer, but that point had some interesting curvature to it. So going back to that right fifth, it's got kind of some swoop to it, actually kind of towards the inside spread. And since I measured it from this perspective, that's probably why it's a touch short. So whenever a point's kind of growing towards you, or, extruding from the beam, whenever a point's kind of extruding towards you, that's usually going to shorten your measurement a little bit, which is why that right fifth was a little bit short. And then the main beam, I know it's got to be short, and the main beam is 51 inches. So my visual estimation was to put it up to about 48. It was actually 51. And then the spread, it nailed. So all around, I would say this was like a C plus on the estimator tool. So it's a pass, but not quite as precise as I would like it to be, but a lot of it was because this bull has so much curvature that it's hard to capture all these little subtle curvatures throughout these tines. So that's where you really want to use your visual estimation to compensate and be, always having a good perception of the curvature and then making your adjustments. And that's where, the estimator tool works great in certain circumstances, so it's not just a wholesale trust it for every measurement. And even as you're using it, you want to use your brain to make adjustments and be aware, that we're always working with 3D objects on a 2D image, and that also we don't know the exact value of the anatomical. So the takeaways are build your scale, try and get the best first measurement that you can, and then be using your brain to make sure that you're making adjustments as you're using it. When you get real straight points on a real clear image, it works really, really good. When you start dealing with curvature and these, more challenging things to capture, it just becomes more important to use your brain to make compensations as you work through this. So it's a pass. I wouldn't say it's a A+ pass, but certainly still would have been valuable to me throughout using this bull, especially using it the way that I did. So hope you guys get some value out of this. Keep an eye out for future videos to come.